Hey everyone, welcome to the Industry Show. I'm your host, Nitin Bajaj, and joining me today is Sriram Viswanathan. Sriram, welcome on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here. Let's start with who is Sriram?
Okay, well, I'm a technologist at heart. I'm an investor by profession, and I'm a learner by life.
That's amazing, short and sweet, and looking forward to getting our audience to get to know you a little better. So, tell us why Celesta, what your time in life, phase, career, personal and professional, were you at when you decided to start Celesta?
Yeah. Well, listen, I spent 20 years before Celesta being at Intel from the early 90s till around the 2012 timeframe. And that was a period of incredible growth, incredible opportunities. Remember, internet was not there.
Mhm.
Remember, we were thinking the world was going to end in Y2K. We had the great financial crisis in 2008. But what people don't understand, or perhaps not remember, is that there was no, people were not listening to digital music. We were listening to, CDs.
Mhm.
DVDs didn't exist. Video on laptops didn't exist. So I had this incredible journey of being on the ring side, of watching emerging technologies that fundamentally changed the world. But we didn't know that they were going to change the world at the time that we were in it. So I spent that time. So when I said a lifelong learner, I think I'm perhaps, really lucky to be doing what I do in my professional career as a investor with my passion for technology. But every day I show up to work, I learn something new because there is an entrepreneur that is telling me that they've spent their life thinking about a problem, and they're going to come and tell me in a condensed fashion what they have discovered, what they are working on, why they think it's going to change the world. And I feel like I am, in a business school every day, every hour of the day. So I learn a lot. Some I like, some I get, some I don't, some I make mistakes on. So that is what led me when I left Intel to want to do it, not just for a large institution like Intel, but for my own self. And that led to what Celesta is today. With a few of my partners, we all like each other and we have a common mission. And they all share some version of what I just said in their own life experiences that enriches them. And so that's what I do. So that's how we started Celesta. We all came from different places. My partner, Michael Marks, built Flextronics from zero to, $30 billion. He was CEO of Tesla, before Elon. My other partner, Nick Brathwaite, was a technologist hardcore, built his own startup and sold it, and then subsequently started his own private equity fund. And the three of us came together with a whole bunch of other partners. And when you have the common fabric of what you're trying to learn and what you're trying to do with a common mission, it's just fun.
Amazing. And I can see that joy. I can see the humility that you have and that curiosity, that learning that really drives you and makes you excited to meet more entrepreneurs and support them, invest in them because you believe in them. Now, we are just over a decade into this journey. Give us a sense of the size and scale, but more importantly, the impact Celesta has been able to create in our community.
Yeah. But listen, I think, we are primarily hardware investors, semiconductor systems, really things close to the metal, as it were. Interestingly, that's all we were doing always. Even in my own career when I was at Intel, I was doing a lot of things hardware related. But there was a period in the valley, everybody thought hardware is boring. Hardware is not value creating. Hardware is hard. All of that. Some of it is true. Hardware is indeed, difficult to do. But what has happened is in this period, in the last 10 years, we've become the cool kids again because there's a company, who would have thought NVIDIA would be a $3 trillion company? You know, Exxon was the company that was, the most valuable company 15 years ago or 20 years ago. And so now the entire shift to technology and entire shift to hardware, because there's been incredible value, incredible, solutions and products that have been created by the big companies. Everybody thinks that this is what they were doing all along, when it's actually not true, because we actually went on some diversions to SaaS and consumer internet and all of that. While all of those businesses had their own place, I think solving more fundamental technology and science problems has a potential to create enduring value. And so Celesta has been doing that, forever. And we've all been doing that as individuals forever. So we feel like, maybe you say, right place, right time, but we haven't moved. The goodness of this place has come back to the focus where we've always been.
That's just fascinating. If you will, share us a few numbers in terms of the companies you've invested in and what in turn they have been able to accomplish.
Yeah, well, listen, I think relatively speaking, we're a small firm. In venture, when people say they have $5-10 billion funds, they're not venture capital firms. Venture capital is built on small capital, putting small amounts of money, theory of constraints. When you're flush with capital, bad behavior, creeps in. Valuations go out of whack. Entrepreneurs feel very entitled. All of these things happen, right? So we have invested in 100 companies. 30-ish companies have exited already. We have, 60 plus companies that are very active. We invest primarily in the North America, India corridor, and we are early stage investors. So we write early stage checks. Our check sizes typically are, between $10 and $20 million in a company. And we stay on with this company for as long as we can. And then we try to find an exit. Our expectation is that, our funds that I've done historically, we are now on our fifth fund, we are in the top decile of returns, actual returns, DPI, when you benchmark us against CalPERS or, our Cambridge numbers, because returning money to investors is the number one thing. And, IRR is important, MOIC is important, but DPI is what makes sense. The actual distribution, cash on cash distribution to the investors. So we have actually, raised, let's say $1.2, $1.3 billion. We have returned $1.4 billion, and our portfolio is worth north of $1 billion left, with 60 companies in the portfolio. So our expectation is that if we continue to return money, people will pay attention and give us more money, and we will create more enduring companies. So that's kind of the quantitative measure of how we look at things.
Sriram, first off, congratulations to you, to your partners and the team for building a fascinating organization that is built on the right values. And that's why you're attracting the right kind of companies. And that's a fascinating success rate. 30 exits. Wow, that's amazing. Now, I would love to get a sense for doing what you do. And as you said, hardware is hard. What is the one big challenge you face?
Well, listen, I think when you're trying to, I have a saying that my old mentor and boss at Intel would tell me. When Intel was building factories, he would say to me that we're investing today to build a factory and commit the capital to build a factory, which will be ready in 5 years, to build products that have not been designed yet for markets that have not been created yet. So think about the risk, pancaking of risk that Intel would have to do to build a massive, foundry or a factory to build chips that go into your devices that will use multimedia or whatever, which has not been, the use case has not been created. That, in a way, summarizes the life of a venture capitalist, because we don't know, we're not, we don't have the monopoly on intelligence or smartness. A lot of other smart people, a lot of market conditions change. So we have no idea. So when an entrepreneur shows up the biggest challenge for any investor is not to fall in love with the idea so much right at the beginning, where you completely ignore the heavy lifting that is required to see that payday. It's kind of like, overnight success in 10 years.
Yep.
That's kind of what happens in venture capital. So what the challenge that one faces is to really keep your expectations realistic while at the same time aspire to touch the sky. So that balance is a daily battle. So you have to keep, straddling those two things constantly. And if you do that, you end up making the right decisions. You need constant reinforcement from other people in your own partnership that question your assumptions. So one of the exercises that I like to do is, if I propose a deal or one of my partners proposes a deal, I like to find out with the other partner, for instance, if he's proposing a deal, tell me why I shouldn't do the deal.
Mhm.
Because if I'm proposing the deal, I never think of why I don't want to do the
Right.
deal. I'm thinking of why I want to do the deal.
Yeah.
So that role playing usually would be very helpful. So I wish we did more of that.
And I would imagine as you're playing the balancing act multiple times a day, some meditation and some yoga helps keep the calm.
Yeah, well, for different people, different things. And,
Yep.
maybe some people go run, some people go,
Yep.
be in a quiet room. But I
Yep.
think being centered
Yes.
always and not get, I don't like the highs or the lows.
Yep.
I think just, you know, keep it
Equanimity. Yep.
easy as, easy as it does, right? Just
Yes.
keep it slow and steady.
Makes sense. Now, on the flip side of challenges come opportunities. What's the one that you're most excited about?
Well, listen, I think everybody talks about AI.
Mhm.
My thesis when I was in college was in AI. I had to program in Lisp in 1985. Okay. Nobody knew what AI was. I didn't know either. I worked on a project called Expert Systems for Weather Radar Data Interpretation using Lisp, predicting tornadoes for the National Severe Storms Observatory in Oklahoma. So this was in my college. I had no idea. Everybody is doing AI. But the more important thing that I'm really excited about is not so much, the next large language model or the next tool, but there are some very fundamental questions that people are asking about, what is the role of AI and the interaction, the human interaction that you're going to have. There are lots of unanswered questions about, AI ethics, AI morals, AI prejudice. Those are issues that I don't think we've even scratched the surface. We're talking about training, we're talking about inference, but if you peel the onion beyond the inference, what is the morality that you expect your AI to have? What are the checks and balances to ensure that the person that's training doesn't put their bias and their prejudice and their orientation into the model? How do you build that? I think those are all big challenges. A lot of people, way above my pay grade are trying to solve it, but I'm very curious how that all comes together. So I'm super excited about how this plays out, with caution, because I think it can cut both ways.
I agree. Now, as we look forward, I would love to pause and reflect and ask you to share two moments in your life, career or personal. One where things did not work out as you had expected, and there was failure, lessons that came out of it. And another one where things exceeded your expectations and became a success beyond your imagination.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think, how long is the show, right? Because there's always many, many lessons one learns that you take from than, spending time on the successes. I think the one thing I'll tell you, well, I mean, during my time at Intel, I'll point out the failure. I worked on, very, very heavily in launching a new standard for wireless. It was called WiMAX.
I
It
remember.
was actually, you'll remember, it was a way of actually doing mobile broadband beyond 3G
Mhm.
using IEEE, standards, much like Wi-Fi. And we're trying to do that. And we took on the entire cellular industry, you name it, every large carrier British Telecom, China Telecom, Vodafone, AT&T, Verizon, all of them, and we launched the standard. While it was incredibly successful as a technology, commercially it failed. And that's when you realize the goodness of a technology by itself doesn't guarantee success. And I learned that lesson much later, but it should have been obvious because if you remember, before the iPad, the, Newton, or I should say before the Palm Pilot, the Newton was there,
True.
but the Newton failed, but the Palm Pilot succeeded. And this was very close to me because I applied that lesson from that to understand what went wrong in WiMAX, because the Newton had better technology than the Palm Pilot. But the Palm Pilot was successful because it catered to a particular need of the consumer. So shooting above the curve on technology for technology's sake is never a good idea. And of course, Clayton Christensen wrote a book about it, only the Innovator's Dilemma. So
Right.
that's the book, and that is the biggest lesson I've learned. Now, the other thing that has worked way better in your second question than I expected, and I launched a small fund when I left Intel, and it was a $25 million fund to start with. We raised a little bit more money, but when we actually thought about what are we trying to do in the U.S.-India corridor, it made a lot of sense to merge with my other partners who had a fund of their own called WRV, Walden Riverwood Ventures. It made sense because at that time I realized if the ultimate objective is to back the most interesting companies, the most talented entrepreneurs, it is less important as to who was in control as a firm. And it's better to have more smarter partners that you can work with and learn with. And scaling as a group is much better than building one's own platform. That was a lesson, and that has just worked out incredibly well for me. And I'm just in gratitude for that.
That is amazing. I'm glad that, the wisdom that prevails us tells us that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yeah.
So, now, amongst all of these things that are happening around, what do you do to take a pause and enjoy, have fun?
Well, listen, I have varied tastes. I read a lot. I listen to a lot of music. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I have more recently stopped watching the news. That has really created an incredible amount of mental balance and peace. And so my advice would be don't watch the news. And so I read a lot, and my interests vary from physics to philosophy to just the new things that we can learn every day. So one of my partners, when I sent him something which was just intriguing as a math problem, he said to me, "You're weird." And I said, and I'm proud of it because that's what I like. I mean, it's just learning every day. So I just enjoy it.
That's fascinating. Well, first off, I'd like to welcome you to my club. I haven't watched or read news in coming up on 27 years now, and
Right.
I've been called weird many a times, and I gladly accept it.
Yeah. I wear it as a badge of honor. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Now, talking about books and podcast, is there one that you would want to share or recommend?
Well, listen, I absolutely love Acquired. I
Mhm.
love Lex Friedman. I love Hidden Brain.
Mm.
I love Sam Harris. So that tells you
Yeah,
the range of interests that I have, all the way from business to technology to spirituality to world issues to all of that. So I just love all of that.
fascinating. Now, on to my favorite part of the show. We call it the one-line life lessons. Sriram, I would love for you to share your one-line life lessons with us.
Well, listen, I knew you would ask that. So I had exactly 90 seconds to think about it. But that said, listen, everybody's thing is different. I don't have any profound teaching or anything to give people. I'll tell you what works for me.
Yes.
Staying humble. I don't have a, monopoly on smartness or knowledge. And more often than not, I'm wrong. So staying humble, helps me. And I've always valued, as you said, to go far or go with others. I've always collective than the individual. I would rather be part of a group that succeeds than be the one guy that made it happen. And I think it all stems from, you know, intellectual honesty and just being authentic and not be afraid of failing. And, don't get harp on, the last great thing that you did. If you said that, somebody else who's going to come and tell you that they did it better. So very simply, I have 5 things. Stay humble. The collective is bigger than the individual. Be authentic and intellectually honest. Fail shamelessly, but learn. But don't linger on your successes. So these are the 5 things. Sometimes, to be honest with you, I get them right with all of these 5 things. Sometimes I fail. Even in these 5 things, even following these 5 things, I fail. So that's how I think about life.
Sriram, thank you so much for making the time to share your journey and your story and your life lessons. We really appreciate it. Congratulations on the continued success. And we would love to bring you back on and share more of your success stories.
Nathan, thank you. It was enjoyable to be with you.
Thank you.